Welcome to our conference about AI. So is AI taking over the short-term rental industry? Is it us versus AI or us with AI? We'll be talking during this session about a few topics, such as, for example, what Airbnb and Verma and Booking.com are doing right now to your listings. They are using these technologies. These big platforms are using these technologies on your listings. Your listings right now are impacted by this kind of technology when it comes to ranking, content, and the rest. What we'll see too, we'll see how you can leverage these technologies for yourself. And we'll finally do a Q&A to help you understand which AI vendor you should be considering right now, what you'll be looking into, and what kind of buzzwords should you be wary of when you hear a vendor talking to you about AI-powered stuff. All right, so first we have a few people talking during the conference. So I'm the founder of Rental Scale Up, the head of product marketing at PriceLabs. Braden Flaherty is the hospitality program manager for Adaptive. Evan Dolglow is the head of productive hospitality for Adaptive. And we have Anurag Verma, he's the co-founder of PriceLabs. And he used to work he is a data scientist, United Airlines, working on pricing algorithms. Here are 3 bonuses you're going to get when you attend the session. And first, I will start with an example from Airbnb. So what Airbnb has done last year when they launched Airbnb categories, they changed a few things. For example, you see this example with this villa in Bali. That's the listing page on the left with the property name. You can see that first thing that Airbnb in the search results has renamed the property, right? We go from stunning villa, stunning garden villa surrounded by garden with a pool to just villa in Keduri. Keduri is a place in Bali. As you can see, basically, Airbnb is using some simple rules to rename properties to make it easier for users to assess what the property is about, but it does mean loss of control for hosts. Same thing, Airbnb categorizes listings. Here it's tropical listing. It lifts signals from the amenities, from the location, from the content descriptions, even the reviews, to then determine, again, through simple rules, in which category a private listing belongs, and hosts have no say about it. It's very hard actually for a host to know in which category the listing belongs. So that's just an example of what Airbnb is doing here, using these kind of like algorithms, machine learning to change or modify a bit how people discover your listings.
They're probably also doing image classification, and they see that there's jungle in the background, that there's pools, and they're looking at every single aspect of what the guest is looking at, but also what the property is feeding. And the idea is that all the properties carry such unique attributes, like this one. It has the pool, the umbrellas, the trees, and all those other attributes. And each guest is super unique in their own way too. Each guest has a certain amount they're willing to spend, what their preferences are. So what Airbnb does is it connects the dots between the guest and the property in so many ways that we probably can't even comprehend.
All right. Second example I want to take is Booking.com. If you're listing on Booking.com, you know that you cannot create your own listing description. And I know that I worked at Booking.com, and I know that before working at Booking.com, I could not understand when I was listing my property. I'm like, they're going to ask me for my description at some point. I will have to enter my description, and I never did. Why? Because basically, Booking.com does a pretty good job, I would say, pretty good job at taking, whatever amenities you're listing, boxes you're ticking, or the location of property, the type of property, or whatever they know actually is searched by users and converts, get them more booking, or is good for their SEO. They kind of mix all this to generate automatically a description. And you can see here, for some reason, this description for this property in Myrtle Beach is super heavy on location. It's like, this far away from a theater, from a country club, from, I don't know, from a golf course, which probably, I'm guessing, matters for people who are going there or not. But what do you guys think, Braden, for example, about this description?
Yeah, I think one, Booking.com deserves some credit for being fairly early to implement natural language processing to accomplish this. They were, I think, one of the first channels that leveraged it. But it makes sense because they're in a somewhat unique business constraint in that they serve a very international audience. And so this is a mechanism for them to be able to serve consistent and accurate descriptions to folks no matter what language they're speaking, without having to employ a number of translators and worry about things like idioms getting lost. So super effective. As you noted, though, it can be frustrating for a manager because they're not able to control the merchandising and messaging around their property, at least not in that field. One pro tip is you can always use the hotelier field, and that does allow for free text. So if you want to get your listing description in there and go beyond what's shown, check out the hotelier description.
Exactly. Check out your host profile on Booking. Another example here, and maybe Anurag will be able to chime in, I'm guessing for some reason. That's Airbnb's smart pricing tool. As you may know, nowadays, if you list a property on Airbnb, by default, Airbnb will turn on their smart pricing tool, right? It's a tool that basically makes your prices vary, and they do this for millions of listings, which is interesting because in a sense, it's a marketplace where they themselves somewhat are the market makers or market pricers, right? So imagine if Amazon, suddenly Amazon.com was varying the prices of the goods on Amazon.com, what would everybody say? But apparently Airbnb is doing this. So I'm pushing it, of course, for the example, just to say, a lot of hosts have this by default. What's your take on this, Anurag, on what Airbnb is doing here?
Yeah, so for every property that you list on Airbnb, right, Airbnb is able to look at what other properties are around that might be similar, what kind of prices do they sell at, and in every price calculation, you come up with something called elasticity. You have to estimate, if I increase my price by 10%, how much does my chance of booking goes down by? Right, so you try to estimate those probabilities. You look at similar properties. What are they selling at? You try to figure out, is there a high season? Is there a low season? So here it looks like towards the right side, there's a bit of a higher season, and last minute there's a bunch of discounts and possibly low season as well going on, right? All of that said, what they're doing is they're saying, hey, this property is potentially similar to these other properties. The owner might have, or the host might have some constraints to say, like, I just never want to sell below $100. And that might be some cost constraints or some operational constraints. And then for various reasons, they might say, never sell above 250. Although Airbnb is saying, hey, sometimes you might go as high as 537, right? Increase that limit a little bit. and what Airbnb is then doing, okay, I'll stay within these boundaries, and I'll fluctuate your prices. I want to counter that Amazon example a little bit. Airbnb, for the most part, is going to look at demand that shows up on Airbnb and try to figure this out. But for a lot of folks, the same home and the same nights are also being sold on other platforms. Like people book a list on Verma, on Booking.com, on Airbnb. And unlike Amazon, where you can sell the same water bottle 100 times, on Airbnb, the product is a single night, right? And the same night can't be sold multiple times. So you do have to make sure that your prices are optimized across all OTAs, across demand that might be coming from all OTAs, and not just one channel. And so that's one of the reasons some people choose to not do this. If you're just listed on Airbnb, even then, sometimes I would say it's better off to think about these, and if they work for you, great. But to think about, are they being useful or not?
That's interesting, Anurag, and thank you for correcting me on the Amazon.com example. And that's an example probably where Airbnb is trying to find the right price to match demand and supply, and to have the most conversion possible, biggest conversion rate possible to make the most money. And in a way, it's kind of the last example we have, what we have as well for Booking.com. And if you look at the ranking, right, how platforms rank properties, sometimes people say, "Oh, I want to be listed. I want to be number on the first page of these websites," but it's actually not possible, in the sense that depending on where you're searching from, or what you've searched in the past, what you booked in the past. Usually the rankings you're going to see when you make a search, they're going to be different from one person to another, or even for yourself from, one device to another, sometimes even possible. And what's interesting though, in Europe, Booking.com displays this warning saying that the ranking is influenced by the commission paid by the properties, right? And if you click on this, you probably don't see this in US. I'm guessing it's mandatory in the EU. And they tell you basically the biggest factors for the ranking, right? In the second part, you can see I've underlined the second idea. Yes, stuff like, the review scores, whether it's well reviewed, whether the policy is flexible, the pricing, the quality of content is important. But in bolded, you have the click-through rate, the gross booking or net bookings. Basically, what it means that we're going to uprank properties that get, for example, the most bookings, even net bookings outside of cancellations, because in the end, they make 15 to 17% commission on each booking. So the goal for them is to have, uprank properties that make a lot of those bookings that don't cancel, right? That's the goal. So it's interesting as well. You can see the ranking here is completely influenced by what the machines will, or the algorithm, let's say, will determine as like, okay, that's how we optimize the revenues for the company. Makes sense, right? These platforms are no charities, and we all know that, and they are there to make money. Anyway, if it's got a good click-through rate, a good conversion rate, also means that that's what people want to buy. So there's some kind of logic here, but again, it's important to understand the logic on how this is re-ranked. And again, you don't have much say about it, unless, for example, here, maybe you pay more to Booking.com to get upranked. And any thoughts on this ranking I was presenting?
Yeah, I think that you mentioned on the last slide that that some of the pricing ideas come from Amazon. Well, this sort order also comes from Amazon. Amazon for over, I think, 12 or 13 years at this point has been personalizing the recommendations and the search results to things we like. But sometimes we're just an anonymous visitor. Amazon doesn't know anything about this. So a lot of the data points you see on the right, I would suggest that that's the default sort for Booking.com if an anonymous visitor comes to the page. But based off of everything you click on, or if you're logged in, Booking.com learns about you and understands you further, and that sort order will improve to your behavior, your preferences, and your purchasing power. So the idea is Booking.com will guide you through a booking journey based on some of these data attributes that they can gain. But whatever you click on and whatever you look at, from pictures to listings, it will improve your journey and personalize it further to you.
Perfect. Thank you, Evan, for giving this precision again, for countering a bit my devil's advocate speech. Perfect. I like it. That's what we're here for. Now I will go into ChatGPT, because I know it's basically what's been buzzing, right? A lot. But as you can see here, we've gone already beyond just content generation. We talked about pricing, ranking, personalizing what's displayed on the screen, right? But ChatGPT clearly is on your mind, right? And what I'm going to do, again, in the email you're going to get after this, I'm going to give you the exact prompts, ChatGPT prompts I'm going to be using here in these examples, so that you would be able to use it for yourself, adapt it for yourself, right? So no worries about this. So, and that's the end of the slides. I'm just going to the demo mode for ChatGPT, and I will then let people speak. So let me right now go to ChatGPT. So all right. So as I said, I will show you a few prompts, and I will explain them quickly because I have 8 more minutes before we go to the second part, which is like debating what all these categories are, what this is, right? Let me share the first one. All right. You should be seeing ChatGPT now. If you don't, let me know. I need to move my screen a bit. All right, so here it's an example, right? It's an example where a lot of people think of ChatGPT as a generator, like out of thin air, I can ask a question and we get an answer, like sort of like a new kind of searching. And it is true in a way. You can use ChatGPT to generate ideas, for example, right? For example, here again, I will give you the prompt in an email. But here, basically, I'm saying, okay, give me ideas for. Imagine I'm a property manager in Banff, Canada. I want to write blog articles about family trips in Banff, right? I'm asking here ChatGPT. Let me show you the script, the prompt. I'm asking it to write about outdoor activities for families in Banff. And also, I'm asking it to put the results in a table and to rank by keywords and keywords that are being searched. So it's kind of helping me as well create content that's actually should be popular, right? Again, here's just an example to show you that ChatGPT can do a lot of things, generate ideas, can also sort out the ideas, even give you a nice table, for example. So indeed, it is powerful. But what's very interesting is that you have different uses for us in our industry with ChatGPT. For example, let me give you another. Meanwhile, what do you think of this first example? Sorry, to our speakers. While I'm doing the second one. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think it just exemplifies how it can be really useful for brainstorming. I think, as a great starting point and jumping off point, if you've got writer's block, if you're struggling to come up with content ideas for your site, for newsletters, it can be a great way, even if it's maybe not 100% polished and ready for publishing. It's a great way to kick things off if you're having trouble finding where to get started. And
apparently 64% of you have already used ChatGPT. Look at that. Look at that. As Brayden said, that's probably a good way to start. And you guys have been starting already using the tool. So let's see a second prompt I will be using today for an example. A second prompt is something you can do as well. Imagine, for example, you want to reply to review, right? I was talking I'm part of a mastermind with other property managers, and one of us was sharing that his wife basically has to answer about 200 reviews per month. And they're starting using this kind of technology to reply. So here I've entered an actual review I found. And what's interesting with this review, there's some good and some bad, right? So let's see. Enter the same. Oops, sorry. Enter the same request. That's probably my bad. Copy pasting the wrong thing, but it's fine. There we go. Oh, there we go. Bear with me as I'm switching from one screen to another. All right. As I said, that's a review for a chalet, right? I got on Airbnb. So I'm just asking ChatGPT to reply to this Airbnb review for our chalet. And you can see here in the original review, maybe it's a bit small, but it's stuff they like. They like the views, the privacy. They thought, for example, it's lacking is that there's not enough hot water to shower. That's a bit annoying. And the dryer was not working. So what I like here is that, again, ChatGPT is smart enough to pick up that there's some bad things that they should apologize for and say, we're working on it, which you should be doing, obviously. And also underlining the good things, right? So that's just an example to show what's interesting here. You're also able to input what you want, right? Just not out of thin air. Input what you want. Here I'm putting as an input an actual review I had, and it's going to rewrite, for example, or write a reply to this actual review, right? So it's just not like going somewhere else to find words or something. It's just actually using the actual input to give you an output. But of course, based on other examples of reviews, it has probably seen in the past, right? I'm guessing that's what they're probably using models or things like this. Am I saying things right here?
ChatGPT generally uses what are called large language models, which in the essence are predicting the probability of what word should follow what word, depending on context, right? So this is a great example where I would say, yes, automate, but do verify. Do not have it so that it automatically writes it and sends it over. You do want to read it before sending that review over, because ChatGPT, there are plenty of examples out there in the wild now where it has the tone completely wrong or completely made up facts about things. So even though it's reading your review and trying to reply, it also has learned plenty from the outside world to be able to figure out what to say. and it might inject one of those things and might apologize for hot tub or something like that, where you didn't even have a hot tub, right? And that's on the mild side of things. So yeah, use it to save time, not to get out of it completely.
Exactly. And let's do two further examples, exactly going your way, Anurag, in the sense that let's have it even more powerful, but we're going to see examples where indeed we have to make sure we know we are making sure that we know that what's happening. So here, for example, I'm going to show something else, which is obviously what's interesting with ChatGPT. You can talk with it, have a conversation. What I mean is that it can give you a first output, and then you can sort of talk to it and say, yeah, for example, you get an output and you say, yeah, I guess, you know what, but do a bit more like this, or correct your tone, be more polite, or, you know, rewrite this if it was a interior design magazine, for example, for a description, right? You can really get an input and refine, talk to it and refine, right? Here's an example where basically I'm telling ChatGPT that I have an issue in the sense that I'm an Airbnb host. I clearly saying in my listing it's not pet friendly. Somebody would come with a dog, so I'm asking ChatGPT what to say. So here, say, okay, this is like getting an example, a very polite way to say I don't allow dogs. I'm very firm, but okay, I'm upholding my policy because I want to do something polite, firm. Polite, firm. Let's see. I want to give ChatGPT another thing. I would say, well, yes, but. So I'm talking to ChatGPT in a way. Right? Yes, but the guest says that it is a therapy dog. What should I reply? So here, indeed, we're entering the world where I'm asking sort of ChatGPT how to run my business, right? So in a way, right? So here, basically, you know, apparently ChatGPT knows there's something called the Americans. So especially mostly based on US data, by the way, I'm guessing. Americans with Disability Act, which means that I can't say no to somebody coming with a therapy dog. But what's interesting, it does tell me in the advice, it gives me some advice, right? There are guidelines and stuff. So in the advice, what it's telling me, I have to say yes, but I can happy to confirm the request if I get the documentation, for documentation. Again, here, I don't even know if it's true this thing exists. I'm guessing it does exist because it's, you know, maybe you've been asked to welcome a therapy dog, but it's interesting. They give you a way out of it, which is maybe legal, which is an appropriate documentation. But again, does it make sense in your market? Is it actually true, right? This seems to make sense, but exactly, I think that Anurag was saying, we're in a world where this kind of looks like it makes sense, but you should check. Clearly, you should check. Any other thought on this before the last example?
Yeah, Thibault, I think that kind of underscores something that folks run into a lot with ChatGPT, in that it can be very confident and create a convincing tone. And the goal of that large language model is not necessarily to be precise or accurate with the data it's conveying, it's to make it sound natural. And that's something that's going to improve over time. But I thought it was interesting, the last time we ran that prompt, it actually referenced the Fair Housing Act, not the ADA. And so even the justification changed between the two times we ran that. And that's something to be aware of, is that, you know, especially if you're getting anything related to a legal issue, there's a lot of promise for this stuff in the legal profession. But it's not something that you would want to, you know, place some liability on or put liability on yourself. And they're particularly prone to go off track and provide misleading information as conversations go on. So that's something to be cautious of as well, is if you're in a lengthy conversation with those, you may be more prone to what they call hallucinations, which is not something you would want to expose a guest to.
So indeed, the results changed from, you know, when we tried out the first time. So do you think ChatGPT is listening to us? I won't go further. Who knows? All right, last example here. Again, that's going to be interesting as well. We obviously, a lot of you probably want to improve their listing descriptions, right? If you have like 25 apartments, the very same apartment in a building, it's kind of hard to be original. So obviously, you've probably tried this already. You enter like a few things like 4 bedrooms, you know, 3 baths and a balcony, and ChatGPT is able to give you like 3 different versions for the same input. Great. Let's go a bit further, right? Here, for example, I'm going to, for the last example, I'm going to input something different, which is content from all right. What I'm doing here, it's going to be a bit long, but what I'm doing here, I've lifted from Airbnb an actual description for a property. It's pretty short. It's that bit. It's like, you know, very short about what they do. Oh, sorry. It's the beginning here. That's the description here, the original description, right? It's like very short, but what they do, what they are. But what I did then, I copy pasted 3 reviews, review number 1, review number 2, 3 pretty long reviews where actual guests were talking about things they liked at the property. And what I'm doing here, I'm telling ChatGPT to take the, sorry to move this. I'm telling it, I'm giving you a description. So use that the original draft description, and then lift from the reviews some quotes, words, or sentiments to then create a new listing description that's really aimed at families, right? And that's the result we get. Basically, it's still writing, it's a bit slow, but what's interesting here, I'm gonna go fast, but you can see that in the description, it's lifting words from or from the actual reviews. Like guests have said that it's got incredible amenities, breathtaking view. And also what's interesting, it also add to descriptions things like the 3 views talked about, which are like, for example, not only the views, but some of the amenities. So it's able to add to this. Again, it's just an example where, for example, I would check whether the things are actually in reviews, but it's a way for you sometimes to say, you know what, I'm going to make my description more livelier by just lifting words, quotes, sentiments from actual reviews we had. That's the last one. Okay, so now we've seen a few things here about, you know, the big platforms, what they do, or ChatGPT, what it does. Again, I will give the prompts, right? And feel free to add your questions in Q&A. But so I'm talking here to our experts, right? When we see these different kinds of tools or things working, what are the different categories of technologies that we've seen here? What kind of flavors of AI do we have here? Maybe Anurag, do you want to get started with that?
So what we've seen, Thibault, is many different examples of a fairly vague term called AI or artificial intelligence, right? Like broadly speaking, you can think of it as, okay, is it helping you making decisions? Is it learning from its mistakes or from its successes and things like that? Or is it simply getting so much information from outside that it's able to do something for you that you couldn't earlier, right? So if you think of the ranking or the categorization problem, that's a fairly standard problem in machine learning or computer science called classification, right? Like you look at a bunch of attributes, and there are also a lot of labeled, like maybe they got 1,000 people to label 10,000 properties to say, tell me whether it's a villa or not, tell me whether it's a flat, an apartment, what it is. And from that, they can say, okay, I'm going to train and see based on the description what classifies as a villa, what classifies as an apartment. And then they're able to do it, scale it up for their 7 million or 8 million properties, right? There is language processing. Again, there is a lot of written information out there in the world, and you can throw a different set of models called neural networks at it and say, hey, can I now generate similar sounding text from what has been written out in the world before? Right? We didn't talk about images, but even like this is a little clearer to see. Like there are generative image creators as well, where they can, like, you give it a prompt and it will create an image for you. And what it's doing is it's again looking at what pictures are around, what have they been described as, and then trying to pick from there. In terms of prices, again, it's looking at patterns and different kinds of things and trying to say, okay, what books, what doesn't book, at what price, and then you give it an objective or a goal to say, hey, I want to maximize revenue, or I want to maximize how many bookings happen on Airbnb and then things like that, and figure out, okay, what do we want to optimize for? And then any program, any machine learning program, AI, or any algorithm has a goal in mind, and it's trying to get that goal accomplished in some ways, right? So the goal for you in ChatGPT was to get a text output, right? The goal somewhere else might be to get a customer to book your property. The goal somewhere else might be to not get them to book now, but get them to book so that you make the most money, right? So like, they're all different flavors of automated decisions that are being made on your behalf with your oversight. I think that's the important part here, that you don't want to lose control of what you're doing.
Thank you, Anurag. How about you, Braden? Again, we've seen a lot of examples. How would you categorize all these different technologies?
Yeah, and I think to reiterate what Anurag said a little bit is AI is an immensely broad category, and there are tons and tons of categories within that. And so I think focusing less on some of the technical side, neural networks and large language models and supervised and unsupervised learning and transformers and all those, kind of want to talk about the applications of those and how folks can put those into practice and the types of AI that are suitable for mainly our industry. And so we talked a lot about generative AI. ChatGPT is well known there. There is a hospitality specific product recent to the market called Yada.ai that appears to use something like a large language model to handle some guest communication. Recommendation systems are very popular. There's another hospitality specific tool, Lassie.ai, that allows for kind of the perks associated with travel programs to be personalized and recommended to an individual user, so they're more likely to use points. Language processing, we covered the related translation things. We didn't talk much about sentiment analysis, and that's another extension of language processing. And that's really useful for things like review handling. If you're a large organization and you deal with a lot of service providers, that could be something to use to kind of rank and understand who your best partners are. Image classification is big. The ability to classify and maybe provide alt text or captions for a large volume of images. If you've got hundreds of homes with dozens of photos each, going through that by hand could be really challenging, but the tools are getting to a point where it can do things like reliably identify a kitchen, identify a pool, hot tub, et cetera, and save you some time and serve some accessibility goals. And then I think lastly, one of the other big categories that's emerging in the space is in predictive AI, and that's where adaptive finds itself. That's useful for predicting all sorts of future conditions based on past and ongoing data. And so serving recommendations by predicting what an individual guest might have an affinity to. Predicting fraud. I mean, I think virtually everybody on this call, if you're using a mainstream payment provider, already has AI in place to detect fraud when you're taking a payment online. Guest verification tools are coming to market quickly. Pricing tools use predictive AI. And there's predictive audiences as well, which is kind of its own whole topic and fairly exciting.
Yes, indeed. Some names come to mind, right? For example, indeed, AutoHost scores bookings, or Hospitable as well is able to do some kind of messaging, I think. These are different technologies that exist on the market people are talking about. Evan, what's your take here again on these different kind of technologies that we're seeing?
Yeah, I think Braden and Anurag covered most of the technical aspects, but if we take a step back, it's important to note that this is still very much crawling, and look at AI as a crawl, walk, jog, run approach. Running with AI, only the OTAs are doing, Amazon and big tech are doing. Very, very, very few private businesses are doing that. So ChatGPT is teaching us as a human, when we put something in, we expect something out. And then there's some AI in between. So ChatGPT is really good as like a first step to get companies involved with AI. But in reality, it's just a start. So I would really want to emphasize that this is just the beginning, and that ChatGPT is, again, it's just a way to start working with AI, understand how you can use it, but there are so many other ways that it will be useful. And I think this comes to the point that humans that use AI will take jobs from humans that don't use AI. And I was really delighted to see that almost 70% of this call has already used ChatGPT, because that's your fundamental education, and there will only be more and more and more going forward. So it's great to see that a lot of you already have a fundamental education.
I think on that note of humans using AI, a great example we covered early on, and that was the review responses. I think that ChatGPT can come up with a great way to frame a response in a friendly but firm tone, keep things professional. It's excellent at that. But if you're auto responding to reviews, you're missing out on one of the primary purposes of that, and that's feedback to your business. And so that's where it's important that you have a person who knows how to use these tools, knows those limitations. Maybe you want to look at something like a sentiment analysis tool if you are not getting eyes on all of your reviews, but you've got to close that loop. And this is not a case of being able to hand off all of your responsibilities to a bot. It's a case of, like any other piece of technology, a tool that can make you more efficient, make you more profitable, and save you time.
Thank you, Braden. So we talked about a few, let's say we talked about this different kind of flavors, and we started mentioning different tools, right? And I want to add to the list, and I put them in a messaging, right? And again, they're probably going to be in the takeaway article. There's Paraspot, for example, and I've talked with the chaps at Paraspot. They're fantastic. What they do remote property inspection, right? You take a video once of your property, and whenever a guest checks out, you take they take a photo, and it's going to compare whether something's missing, something's broken. I don't know whether they can see whether a knife is missing in a drawer, but that's another question. But also, I stumbled upon another company. Where's their name? Called HostWizard.ai. It's got it's the ultimate AI-powered tools for Airbnb hosts with guest messaging automator, listing builder, and guest screening. So, as I said, every week I get great people writing to me about this for rental scale up. What should I imagine my property manager. I'm getting these kind of offers. I'm here today listening to this. I should give it a try. What should I do before I get started to even know whether these companies are legit? Maybe Evan, if you want to get started.
Yeah, and I think the easiest way to do that is by just going to look at the team behind it. In reality, not all AI is created equally. A lot of people over the last few years have just used it. They just say AI. Oh, AI this, AI that. But the truth is 99% of companies that say they're using artificial intelligence don't even employ any machine learning engineers or someone capable of delivering that level of technology. So the best way that I see to do due diligence is by going on their LinkedIn and looking at the team's pedigree. What did they do before this? What are their jobs? Where did they go to school? What did they study? What are their proficiencies? And from there, you'll be able to assess, wow, this team is smart. I trust them. But that's definitely the first layer. I think Braden may be able to dive a layer deeper.
Yeah, and I think, it obviously is very challenging, and it's very competitive to put together a team that can deliver this. And I think there's just so much buzz. A lot of property managers are at risk of just kind of falling into leveraging AI for the sake of using it. That I feel like I need to have it. I need to tell my homeowners I'm using AI. So I need to check that box. And it's important to know that it's not all of these tools are appropriate for every business. I say that as someone selling AI, an AI-based tool. Clearly I have an interest here, but some of these things depend on scale. If we talk about predictive audiences, that's a feature within Google that can create audiences that are going to be receptive to particular ad campaigns. You need to have pretty significant volume to leverage that. And so I think make sure that you're not doing this for the sake of saying you have AI. You very likely have some real business problems that you could solve with AI. And so I would look at some of the more challenging aspects of your business. What areas are hard to staff? What areas do your reviews call out as being challenged? Is there an opportunity there? I think any challenge that is, can be addressed that has a lot of data behind it, that's messy and is hard for a person to wrap their head around, these complicated systems. Pricing is a great example. AI is well suited to address. But yeah, I think the other piece I would look at if I was evaluating vendors for AI is ownership of data, portability of data, making sure that this is something that's leveraging your own data and not just like a commercially available product. I personally believe we're going to see a rush of ChatGPT reskinned applications, basically a logo that's industry specific, that's literally just relaying information to and from ChatGPT. There's nothing necessarily wrong with that. Just make sure you're paying an appropriate amount and that it's, using your tone, your business, your training data, and not just leveraging whatever it's crawled on the internet.
Anurag, to go a bit further down, like how to select a vendor, what would you say is a good way to get started, let's say, with a solution, or to see whether it's good for my business, for example, and how to keep control of that?
Yeah, so I think the question you had to start off was like, when somebody is trying to sell as an AI solution to you, like what do you do? How do you evaluate, right? One, almost no one likes vendors that over-promise and over-advertise, right? Like you need to be truthful to your capabilities in some ways. So to Braden's example, like if somebody is using, they might have no machine learning engineers in their team, but they are reskilling OpenAI and ChatGPT, which is the product from OpenAI. If they're open about it, like I think one of the tools you use, Thibault, is called Jasper, and they openly say you're using OpenAI's APIs underneath. That's totally fine. Like as long as you're getting what you're reading, that's fine, right? And then as long as what you're getting is useful, that's an equally important part. So, and I'll go back to one of the examples you mentioned, which is Hospitable. They used to be called Smart BNB, and they've been around for 7-8 years now. I don't know if they use AI underneath or not, but I do know that a lot of people use them for smart messaging, right? That doesn't mean that all of their messages get answered, like all of the guest messages get answered, but questions that are frequent, questions that have certain keywords, I have no idea how they do it, but 90% of the answers, questions get answered by a bot, and the rest get flagged to say, hey, look, I don't know how to correctly answer this, need human input here, right? So like, and I'm making up these 90%, 10% numbers. Hospitable is probably better suited to answer this, but the outcome is it's helping businesses, right? Like, and this may not be helpful to your business, but I'm saying whether it uses AI or not should be secondary to whether it's solving a business problem for you or not. If you are able to if you're already using a tool to do something and something else that claims AI, that they use AI, is able to significantly improve on it, then yes, you should think about it. But the trick is to actually go and compare. Like, for example, for dynamic pricing, it is very easy to do a trial with any pricing providers out there and actually see the price recommendations. Do they understand my market? Like, do they recognize when it's high season, when it's low season? When are my prices, when a big event is happening or when a big holidays, are the prices spiking up? And if that's not happening, then they might claim that they're using AI, but the outcome is not, and they might be using AI, but if the outcome is not what's working for you, that's where you need to decide, okay, like, advertising aside, what's the true usefulness? You need to have a rational sort of decision process and not be influenced by marketing. That's certainly true for anything in life, not just AI, but yeah.
Last question on my side. Thank you, Anurag. Last question on my side before going to the Q&A. So I talked at the beginning, like maybe imagine I'm not ready yet to go with a vendor, get started, but what should I do to future-proof that? What should I do? What kind of data should I be? We talk about saving, storing. What kind of things should I be storing right now to be able to use kind of tools in the future? Maybe Evan, if you want to get started.
Sorry, Thibault, you cut out at that end. Would you mind saying that one more time?
No worries. I'm saying if I want to future-proof what I'm doing right now, maybe I'm not ready to use a vendor, but will in the future. And we talked earlier about how I need to store, save data. So what kind of data should I be saving or storing right now?
Yes. So my specialty is when it comes to your direct booking website and e-commerce. So a lot of you didn't realize this, but I know you're in the hospitality business. You're also in the e-commerce business. Every direct booking site, every OTA uses best e-commerce practices to get guests engaging with their site. That way their machine learning engines can learn more about them. So what I would recommend is making sure your direct booking site is streamlined. Don't try to get too fancy or reinvent the wheel. Have options to click, featured properties, recommended properties, have blog pages, just have as many things as possible to click on your website, because what that's doing, all that data is getting stored in your Google Analytics and it's building audiences. It's learning how your website functions. It's learning where will AI give you a boost when you're ready. So on the, I guess, internet side of things, then my number one recommendation is make sure you're following best e-commerce practices. And if you don't know any, come talk to me. I'd happy to give you a few.
How about you, Anurag, in the sense that what kind of data should property managers try to save or store?
Yeah, from a pure revenue management and dynamic pricing perspective, like your historic booking data is very key, right? So like you don't just want to know when somebody stayed back in 2019. You also want to know when they booked. So for example, where it gets important is for for you to look at your own information, and as well as like when we do pricing, we look at, okay, in for example, Paris, July, let's say, is expected to be 70% booked or 80% booked. But right now we are sitting at Feb end and it's 20% booked. That in itself doesn't tell me anything. I want to know how much was it booked in 2019 during this period, or 2021 or 2022, to be able to see, okay, last year it was 10% booked, this year I'm 20% booked already. Maybe I have a little more pricing power to play with. Demand seems stronger. I should bump up my prices for July, right? Whereas if it's the other way around, I'll be like, okay, things are going softer than expected. So having that historic data, we do a lot of this for the market, saving a ton of historic data to be figure out things. But you yourself have a lot of historic data in your property management system, if you're using one, or in Airbnb, especially if you're using a property management system, which most professional managers tend to use. As you move to a new system in the future, do make sure that your historic reservations and its attributes, how much did it book for, when did they book, and all those things are also getting ported over. Like, don't lose that data somewhere, because it is going to be useful in the future.
Thank you. And how about you, Braden?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that AI is broadly capable of handling really messy data. And so the answer is kind of archive as much as you can. Storage is cheap. There's not much downside to being cautious and making sure that you're recording as much as you possibly can in light of things like regulations and your privacy policy. And I think that's the main thing to keep an eye on, is that, you know, I know we've got a fair number of Europeans on this call, and what you're able to retain with regard to specific guest details is different than here. But I would recommend, you know, ensure you're saving as much of that as your policies allow. I would say to be especially cautious if you're switching software, and not just property management software, but if you're using things like a customer service chatbot. Export all those logs and store that, because that's training data for a possible future automated guest communication tool. You can be storing all of your historical reviews, and that's got fantastically valuable data for you. Obviously, all of the booking data, reservation data, that's a gold mine. So, you know, AI is so good at taking commingled messy data and drawing connections out of that archive it and store it. I would say kind of the last tip there is one thing to be aware of with GA4 becoming the current version, and the old version of Universal Analytics going away for GA. GA4 has pretty strict guidelines on how long data is retained in that system. And so that's another thing you may want to consider doing in the future, is periodically archiving that. I know a lot of clients I've worked with like looking back, and you want to compare this summer's pace versus maybe 2019 or 2018. That's not going to be possible in the new version of GA unless you're taking steps to control your data and store that elsewhere. So I would have that mindset with any piece of software I'm using. I need to make sure that data is accessible, it's portable, I own it, and I have a policy to record that and archive it.
And thank you, Brendan. That's super clear, and thank you all for being very clear about this. So we have 4 minutes for Q&A. I can stay a bit more. I don't know who can stay beyond that or not. It's okay, right? I know you guys are all busy, I will ask one question. I get one of you to answer each one. So the first one who wants to answer, right? So I can go through it quickly. Let me get started. All right. Somebody's asking whether Airbnb actually rewards listings that use smart pricing over the ones that use a third-party tool. I'm guessing that's for Anurag. What do you think of that? Do we know anything?
So from what I understood, the question was, if you use Airbnb smart pricing, do you get a ranking boost? There are two possibilities where you get ranking boost by using Airbnb's algorithm, smart pricing. One is explicit, that Airbnb says, if you're using our algorithm, yes, we want to give you a boost. And the second one is, we've generally heard feedback from a lot of our customers that Airbnb tends to underprice properties. And if you are underpriced, of course, you're a better value to the guest, and you might get a boost. What we generally recommend to our customers is you can actually keep smart pricing on and still edit prices. And that's what our integration does. You can keep smart pricing on and get that explicit boost, and then have our prices still be updated as if you were entering them manually, because you still have that control, right? we have heard of there being a boost, but I'm not sure if it is an explicit boost or if it is just because you lowered your prices, you're going to get booked, which might be nice in the short term to get some bookings, but in the long run, revenue wise, you might be 100% booked, but at $50 a night, whereas you could have been, if you were 50% booked at $200 a night, you've made more money. So think about revenue and not occupancy.
Thank you. Question about ChatGPT. Who can take it? But it's about ChatGPT being used for listing descriptions. For example, to fill in the space section in Airbnb. How can AI know how to describe the decor, layout, the style without seeing the photos the listing writer is using to create the listing? Right. So what do you think of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's 100% true. And one of the risks of offloading that responsibility to ChatGPT, I think that there is a lot of data on that property that it can write an accurate and helpful review, especially, or a helpful description. But as you said, the nuances in a vacation rental, everyone is unique. The details matter there. And I think also offloading that responsibility to ChatGPT puts you at risk of just kind of commoditizing your brand. You probably have something unique to offer about what makes that property special. And if time allows, I think that's certainly worth putting in description. So I like ChatGPT as a starting place. I like it as somewhere to and make sure tone is consistent, that it's professional, minimizes mistakes. But if you have any concept of like brand communication and that sort of thing, I think that you're going to want to make sure that you retain control over that and that you're editing those yourself.
But isn't it coming? I mean, I think Anurag was talking about classification, for example. And I remember when he was working at Booking.com, already they could look at photos virtually and say, oh, that's a pool, that's not a pool, oh, that's a naked person. So they were see what I mean? So how long until we are able just to create a draft, upload 5 photos, and boom, we got that? What do you think? Am I dreaming, or just it's coming?
I don't know who wants to take a bet on AI companies' roadmaps right now. It's probably coming sooner than we realize, but until it's here, I don't know. ChatGPT is not currently crawling the existing web. It's looking at an archive, and it's very often not able to go query, a specific URL or a specific property and provide information on that. So if it doesn't have that in its databases and its model, it's not going to be all that helpful. So, but I think to your point, certainly a more comprehensive tool with the ability to analyze photography on page and be more comprehensive. I mean, I would surely guess that Airbnb, Booking.com, and virtually any retailer in the tech space are working on something similar to that.
I'll add to that. It's actually something we're working on, which is image classification. And let's say you have 20 photos, but this specific guest is looking for a pool. How do we make sure those pool photos are first? And it's the same exact idea with reviews. If you have thousands of reviews, how do you make sure the top 3 reviews that for that specific guest are being shown? So the idea is, how do you take the sentiment? How do you take the just idea behind whatever the content is and make sure you can connect the dots to a specific guest? But that is that's AI personalization, and that is where we're heading.
All right, that's the next. Thank you, Ivan. Next question is for Anurag, I'm guessing, and that's I think would be a good occasion to talk about inputs. Question is from Storm: is PriceLabs using AI scraping to pull the data from all listings for every night in order to calculate the prices it generates?
So I think this is one of those things where AI scraping is hard to define. We scrape all listings. So what we do is every day we are scanning all properties on Airbnb and their calendars to identify what dates that used to be available before are now unavailable. And as they become unavailable, it gives us a signal of like, hey, something might be happening on these dates. If we see 2 or 3 properties become unavailable for a date that is 8 months out, whereas usually nobody books that far out, that to us tells us something might be happening on those dates because a lot of properties are getting snapped up. And as a result, we'll say, okay, let's bump up the rates for the properties that are using PriceLabs, right? So yes, we are scraping and scanning large amounts of data from Airbnb. I don't think it will be called AI scraping. It will just be called scraping. And then we are applying our algorithms on top of it to say, okay, so think of AI as almost nothing today is what is technically called artificial general intelligence. AI is like, here's a task and we have things that can solve it. So like back in 1997, Gary Kasparov got beaten by whatever the chess bot was called, Deep Blue, I think, right? Now you're able to send specific requests to ChatGPT and get an answer to that. Booking.com was able to answer a lot of specific problems, but none of these are in some ways give it a completely new problem, and it might not solve it because it hasn't been programmed for it. And that's where we sit today in terms of like, where is it going? It's still specific to the task in some ways. The task has widened to become language processing. So I would say we use algorithms, we use a lot of statistical sort of inference and things like that to figure out, hey, what does 3 bookings happening 8 months out mean in this market? Is it normal because that's high season, or this never happens? That means something major is happening for the first time or second time or things like that, right?
Thank you, Anurag. Another question, I'm not sure we have the answer, but I'm going to ask, what percentage of Airbnb users are searching using categories versus using the map? It would be helpful, from Joe Schnorr, it would be helpful if there was a tool that told the host how the guest found that property. So I know some kind of like, analytics, more like how you found a property. Any idea on this?
Only that we can infer it's a lot given the prominence it's putting on the page. I think that's information Airbnb is not going to be too excited to share, but they are running tests constantly. They're very data driven. And I think the fact that you see this prominent category display with icons right across the page tells us that that's an effective way to get guests to do a couple of things. It draws them into the booking experience. It also tells Airbnb kind of the experience you're looking for and allows them to offer more personalization later. So I think they're certainly finding value there. As to what exact percentage is using it, I'm guessing that's proprietary. I don't think we're going to find that out.
I would add to this, exactly as Braden said. On top of that, Airbnb is doing all it can, spending money to educate users to start using Airbnb categories. That's what they do in their commercials, right? Each of their commercials features a category. So they want you to start thinking category, right? So they're not promoting the map, they're clearly promoting categories. So again, it's not giving you an actual answer, a direction. I have another question here, which is from Michelle Cloutier asking, can we have AI like ChatGPT crawling our website to help us improve it and more? Who wants to take it?
If it's not here, it's coming.
Yeah. And I think today you could, I mean, it's not going to crawl your website and proactively offer improvement suggestions, but I think if you look at your website content strategically, it's a great tool to make sure that it's meeting those goals. If you're looking at a landing page for guests, maybe that's for an SEO campaign or genuinely for guest education. I think it's totally valid to copy and paste the content you have there into ChatGPT and ask for suggestions on how to improve it in light of whatever that goal is. How could we make sure this is serving guest needs to understand what activities are at this beach? How can we make sure it's told in a consistent tone and voice? So there's a lot of ways you can improve that. And I think what we're seeing about ChatGPT is that there is a skill in prompt writing. And I think that's something that becomes important, is knowing how to use the tool. It might come as a magic wand someday where it's just going to send you a report on what your website should do. But I think your goals and what you're trying to accomplish there. And so learning how to use ChatGPT by writing precise prompts on getting feedback on that is something you could do today.
Thanks. And I will take one last question, and I will ask everybody how to contact you if people have more questions. One last question I see here, and I see that Anurag, you reply to it in writing, but making sure we can see it. Somebody had a question about how basically tools like PriceLabs are able to detect a big event coming, like a championship, a rugby game, or something big. How can you tell?
Yeah, so this is where I actually gave the example live as well, where suppose you're in a market where 8 months out, almost nobody books, right? And then we start seeing that in your market, that there are a few properties that are suddenly booked for a particular weekend. That to us is a signal that something big might be happening there. Now, there are two possibilities. One is there is something actually big happening there. And the second one is some random person just happened to book it, right? Very early. And if it is just randomness, then over time, we will see that, hey, early on there were bookings, but now it has slowed down. Nobody else is booking that weekend anymore. That tells us that, okay, maybe this is not that big an event, but it is, in fact, Rugby World Cup or something like that. We will keep seeing a build-up. And that to us is a continuous signal to keep our prices high because something is happening. Now, the question is, what happens before that first booking happens? So this is where, like, in our algorithms, depending on your lead time of when do people book, we also say, like, if nobody's booking 8 months out, you don't need to sell at a market rate. You can sell at a slightly higher premium so that you are not the first ones to get booked when a major event happens. We see a couple of bookings and then we are able to say, okay, something big, let's bump up our prices further. So this is fairly standard. Like, this is, again, fairly standard stuff in revenue management, whether it be airlines, whether it be hotels, short-term rentals. But again, this is stuff that is very specific, requires a lot of data crunching, and yeah.
Thanks, Anurag. And I see there's still 134 of you attending. Thank you. We are over time. I would like first to thank the speakers as well for allowing us to be slightly over time. I see this bit more questions about this. A lot of questions about PriceLabs, by the way. So what we're going to do with Yuvika, we're going to collect the questions. Most of the questions, there's your name behind it. So we try to find the right way to reply to you. We'll put them in a takeaway anyway article to make sure we're covering the answers, the questions and the answers, so everybody can actually see that as well, right? Not just like one-on-one answer. But for each of you, maybe starting with you, Braden, what's the best way to contact you and know more about Adaptive?
Certainly check us out at adaptive.com. And if you just want to email sales@Adaptive, or you're welcome to contact me directly, Braden at Adaptive. Would love to chat. Also active on LinkedIn, so you can find me there.
How do I spell Adaptive?
AI. Are you going to make me spell it in person? AIDAPTIVE.
Thank you. How about you, Evan?
Same way. I work with Braden. We work with people who are confident about, who want to prioritize direct bookings. So find me on LinkedIn. I'm the only Evan Dalgo in the world, or evan@adaptive.com. And again, if direct bookings are a priority for you and you're a growing business, we'd love to talk to you.
Thanks. How about you, Anurag?
Guys, I'm Anurag from PriceLabs. My email is Anurag, ANURAG, @pricelabs.co. Important point, it's not .com. And yeah, you can reach out to me, or you can reach out to our support team, which is 24/7. So support@pricelabs.co. I do want to add, there was one question where Braden undersold himself. The question was, how can I improve my website? Can ChatGPT scrape everything and improve? I think the question was very broad, right? This is where I want to say you need to be specific about what you want to improve. One of the improvements could be that the list properties you have listed on the front page are not the ones that people want to book. And that's the kind of stuff that I think Braden and Evan Adaptive helps with, right? Like, so the trick is to ask more specific questions rather than very broad questions about how can AI change my life. That's hard to answer, but how can AI do a specific thing for me? That becomes easier to answer.
All right. Thank you all for attending again. And as well, thank you for the bonuses for attendees. I will love that, obviously, right? There's the free weekly newsletter from Rental Scale Up. Sign up for that. There's 15% off a 3-month subscription at PriceLabs. And there's a free evaluation consultation with Adaptive for your strategy. So you're going to get an actual way to redeem these offers through this follow-up email, getting this tomorrow, I think, or the day after, depending. We had some issue with the video recording, so we have to assemble this in one video, so bear with us. But you get this definitely, as well as takeaways and ways to redeem these deals. Thank you again all for attending. Thank you for great questions. Thank you to Adaptive PriceLabs for being here today, and Yuvika for organizing the event. Thank you, everyone, and take care.